Good morning, boys and girls. The next story that I'm going to read today is one that I often read to the first and second grades, and it's called The Legend of the Indian Paintbrush by Tommy DiPaola. Before I start this book, I do want to say that this is an old book, and it was written in the early 80s, about 30 years ago. And at those times, people would refer to Native Americans as Indians. We don't really use that term anymore. We refer to people as Native Americans, but for the sake of reading the book, I'm going to continue to use the language in the book called Indians. But I just wanted boys and girls to know that we don't really use that term anymore. The Legend of the Indian Paintbrush by Tommy DiPaola. Many years ago, when the people traveled the plains and lived in a circle of teepees, there was a small boy who was smaller than the rest of the children in the tribe. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't keep up with the other boys who were always riding and running and shooting their bows and wrestling to prove their strength. Sometimes his mother and father worried about him. But the boy, who was called Little Gopher, was not without a gift of his own. From an early age, he made toy warriors from scraps of leather and pieces of wood. And he loved to decorate smooth stones with the red juices from berries he found in the hills. The wise shaman of the tribe understood that Little Gopher had a gift that was special. Now, a shaman is a person who is a spiritual leader for the Native Americans, like a priest or a minister or a rabbi. Well, the shaman said, "Do not struggle, Little Gopher. Your path will not be the same as the others. They will grow up to be warriors. Your place among the people will be remembered for a different reason." And in a few years, when Little Gopher was older, he went out to the hills alone to think about becoming a man, for this was the custom of the tribe. And it was there that a dream vision came to him. The sky filled with clouds, and out of them came a young Indian maiden and an old grandfather. She carried a rolled up animal skin, and he carried a brush made of fine animal hairs and pots of paint. The grandfather spoke. "My son, these are the tools by which you shall become great among your people. You will paint pictures of the deeds of the warriors and the visions of the shaman, and the people shall see them and remember them forever." The young maiden unrolled a pure white buckskin and placed it on the ground. "Find a buckskin as white as this," she told them. "Keep it, and one day you will paint a picture that is as pure as the colors in the evening sky." And as she finished speaking, the clouds cleared, and a sunset of great beauty filled the sky. Little Gopher looked at the white buckskin, and on it he saw colors as bright and beautiful as those made by the setting sun. Then the sun slowly sank behind the hills, and the sky grew dark, and the dream vision was over. Little Gopher returned to the circle of the people. The next day, he began to make soft brushes from the hairs of different animals, and stiff brushes from the hair of the horses' tails. He gathered berries and flowers and rocks of different colors and crushed them to make paints. He collected the skins of animals which the warriors brought home from their hunts. He stretched the skins on wooden frames and pulled them until they were tight. And he began to paint pictures of great hunts, of great deeds, and of great dream visions, so that the people would always remember. But even as he painted, little Gopher sometimes longed to put aside his brushes and ride out with the warriors. But he always remembered his dream vision, and he did not go with them. Many months ago, he had found his pure white buckskin, but it remained empty. Because he could not find the colors of the sunset. He used the brightest flowers, the reddest berries, and the deepest purples on the rocks, and still his paintings never satisfied him. They looked dull and dark. And he began to go to the top of a hill each evening and look at the colors that filled the sky. And he wanted to try and understand how to make them. He longed to share the beauty of his dream vision with who? The people. But he never gave up trying. And every morning when he awoke, he took out his brushes and his pots of paints, and he created the stories of the people with the tools that he had. One night, as he lay awake, he heard a voice calling to him. "Because you have been faithful to the people and true to your gift, you shall find the colors you are seeking. Tomorrow, take the white buckskin and go to the place where you watch the sun in the evening. There, on the ground, you will find what you need." Can you imagine hearing that in the middle of the night? The next evening, as the sun began to go down, little Gopher put aside his brushes and went to the top of the hill as the colors of the sunset spread across the sky. And there, on the ground, all around him, were brushes filled with paint, each one a color of the sunset. Little Gopher began to paint quickly and surely, using one brush after the other. And as the colors in the sky began to fade, little Gopher gazed at his pure white buckskin, and he was happy. He had found the colors of the sunset. He carried his painting down to the circle of the people, leaving the brushes on the hillside. Now remember that. Leaving the brushes on the hillside. And the next day, when the people awoke, the hill was ablaze with color, for the brushes had taken root in the earth and multiplied into plants of brilliant reds, oranges, and yellows. And every spring from that time on, the hills and meadows burst into bloom. And every spring, the people danced and sang the praises of little Gopher, who had painted for who? The people. And the people no longer called him little Gopher, but he who brought the sunset to the earth. Try that. He who brought the sunset to the earth. And that's the story of the legend of the Indian paintbrush. Now, boys and girls, if you want to do something that's kind of neat, go to your computer or your parents' computer and go to Google and type in Indian paintbrush flower. Then click images, and you'll see that there really is a flower called the Indian paintbrush. And take a look at the colors, and you'll see that the colors of the flowers are exactly like the pictures of the flowers in the story. Some of you younger students may want to make a picture, draw an illustration or a picture, and give it to your teacher when we come back to school. I think that would be a nice project for you to work on. So just so you'll know that over the coming weeks of May, I will be back reading some stories, some for younger students, some for older. The next book I will read is a book called Mrs. Katz and Tush by one of my favorite authors, Patricia Polacco. This is a story that's really good for students who are about 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. I will also read in May a story called Piggy Pie, which is one of my favorites. And I found that students of almost all ages like this story. And then for the older students, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, I have a book that's called Each Kindness by Jacqueline Woodson, who again is one of my favorite authors. I read this book whenever I sub in one of the older classes, and the book is about kindness. And then I always will ask the students to write about 3 or 4 questions. So these are just some of the books that I'll be reading over the next month, and Mrs. Vollard and Mrs. Schultz and Mrs. Jolly will be sending these out to the classes that are appropriate for the reading. Have a good day. Bye.